Hey guys, have you heard about the big news? The big news about Windows 11 getting destroyed by Linux in gaming benchmark? Have you heard about it? Well, I heard about it, I digged into it, I debate about it already. But I felt like I needed to share my point of view on this article because there is a lot of things to say about it. Let's get into it. So as always, we're going to start with a little bit of context. The first article that kind of like make me discover the full like crazy theory about the fact that Linux was destroying Windows in gaming benchmark was an article from Tom Hardware. And this article is what it is. I won't talk really about it, but it kind of came out from a really positive note, saying that overall, Linux is getting better when it comes to gaming, and nobody can say the opposite. I will be aligned with this. However, there is some like nuances I want to talk, and to get there, I think we need to go on the source of the data this article mentioned. And the source of the data is another article made by Computer Base, which is a German website. So here we are on the German website, and the article, it was the source of the Tom Hardware like second writing. And what I've done, like I Google Translate it, and I went through it. And I think I really want to talk about this article and those numbers because I spent a lot of time doing benchmark and gaming on Linux for the last 2 years. I made a lot of video in which I prove in certain case scenario that Linux is better than Windows for gaming, but only in certain case scenario. And I think this is where I want to, dive into a little bit, and I want to share my results for you guys because I think it will be interesting because we can have an exchange here. I want to see also on your hand what you think about my theory and my findings. So here, Linux gaming with distribution run Windows game best. So if you go there, I'm going to go fast. They pick 3 distribution, Arch Linux, good choice. My favorite distro. Then they pick Nobara Linux, another great choice when it comes to running games in general. Nobara is based on Fedora and Glorious Eggroll, that we all know for Proton GE, has made like this distro. I tested it. I'm not super fan of it because of my needs. It doesn't fit everything, but it's still a good distro. And then we have PopOS, which is an Ubuntu-based distro, which is, to be fair, like not a bad distro either. What I would say towards this is just their choice of desktop environment is GNOME 42. And in all my tests, I noticed that GNOME was always a little bit behind when it comes to gaming. I don't know why, but I was always like 5, 10, sometimes 15% behind, even if I used all the same packages, same kernel, same driver for my graphic card. I noticed that GNOME was just impacting negatively my results. So I will stay away from PopOS, but this is just my findings there. Let me know, guys, if you have the same type of result on your hands. I will be like interested to learn about your experience. Now, they decide to compare those distros against Windows 11. So here, I have to say, in terms of like methodology, I wouldn't go with Windows 11 for a simple reason. I have a lot of friends in competitive gaming, and what came back from their experience, but also like from a lot of users on internet, is that Windows 11, when it comes to 1% low in gaming, it's not as good as Windows 10. Windows 11 is definitely not the operating system of choice for people who compete in video game. Most of them, they will stay on Windows 10 for the reason I mentioned just before. So I don't know why they went there, but why not? Now we covered the software operating system side. Let's talk about the hardware. When it comes to hardware, they went full AMD. They choose the 5800X for the CPU, and they choose the 6700 XT AMD card there. So here, I'm also not super happy about the choice, and I'm gonna tell you straight why. It's not really representative of the majority of gamers. Majority of gamers, they are running NVIDIA card. I know some of you guys are gonna jump on their chair, but that's the reality of the market. Okay? The reason behind it or not, it's another debate. I know that if you want to run Linux, the easier way to go there is to run the AMD GPU. Of course, I'm aware of that, and I'm not denying it. But I think for the test itself, it would have been interesting to have, you know, the same benchmark running with the NVIDIA card. And I'm going to explain why after. Now, let's talk about the last part, which is also super important. It's the choice of resolution. They decided to go with a 1080p resolution, which kind of like mean a lot of stuff. The first thing is that those games, they're going to be CPU limited, right? Because most of the work is going to be relying on the CPU rather than on the GPU. Okay, like this is a super important point. So I hope you will remember all of them when I get to my conclusion. So here, okay, I get it. Why not 1080p? And then the choice of game, they went for games which are okay, but, and this is also some of my experience, they went with Starfield. And Starfield, it's kind of a discustable choice. I made a video actually about Starfield in which I explained that the game is so poorly optimized, it's just disgusting. Like literally disgusting. So when you put yourself in a setup where you are CPU limited and you take games which are, not all of them, but some of the games which are poorly optimized, the output of the benchmark might not super be representative of what it is ready. And again, I'm going to explain that in detail after. But I want you to understand all the variables here. Here is the result. What I'm going to do, I'm going to switch to the German website because here with the translation, I can't really like play with a percentage. Here we are. So you got the idea, this is the result, and you have Nobara, which arrive on top of everybody when it comes to FPS, which is awesome. Like, don't get me wrong, this is a really, really good result overall, showing up that with those games and this specific hardware, well, Windows 11 is actually getting behind Linux. And you have to think, this is even more incredible from my perspective, because when you run any type of those games, they don't run natively on Linux. They have to go through the Proton wrapper, which means like all the instructions are getting translated. Even going through this wrapper, you have better result on Linux than on Windows. It's just mind-blowing. I have my little theory about it, but we'll talk about that after, but you get the idea, right? Now, when it comes to the little fight between the distro, I guess we are kind of aligned again with what I was saying earlier, which is that Nobara and Arch Linux, they're going to be performing well, and Pop! OS will be a little bit behind, and I believe it will be just because of the desktop environment. But 4%, it's like nothing. Now, when it comes to frame times is related to not the average, it's really like taking consideration like the 1% low, and see like how the 1% low could impact your gaming experience. So for people who does not understand the concept, if you play any type of video game or if you do any type of benchmark, you're gonna have an average of FPS. But this average is not really representative of your game experience. Your game experience is gonna be really how these FPS are going up and down, right? So let's say you have a 300 FPS average, but you have deep at 1 FPS, and you also have like max at 700 FPS. Even if at the end you have 300 FPS, when you average them, it's not telling the full story. Because if you go at 1 FPS, your screen is going to freeze. It's going to be disgusting. So my perspective, and this is what I always say, and that's why when I make all those videos about, customizing your kernel and trying to optimize everything, I don't really care about the final average FPS. I think it's not representative of the experience. We should always focus on the 1% low. This is the main, in my opinion, main variable you should be looking at. Because when you play competitive, I don't care about having 800 FPS. If I am in front of an opponent and my FPS dip and then everything starts to be sluggerish, I lose the game. And this is exactly what this specific benchmark kind of tell you. And here you can see that Arch Linux is on par with Windows 11, which is a pretty good result. But then Nobara and Pop! OS are 8 to 9% behind. So it's not that bad. But if your FPS are not high enough and the fluctuation goes really low, it could impact your gameplay and everything else. Again, it's still a super good result for Linux overall. Now let's talk about each of the game. I'm going to go through them pretty quick, but I think the story is always the same. We're in a position where Arch Linux and Windows 11 are on par, especially for the 1% low, which is good. It's pretty sweet. I would say there is some case scenario where Windows is a little bit ahead, depending on the game, like in Ratchet and Clank, and also in the Talos principle here. Okay, like you can tell, Windows 11 still has a better experience when it comes to 1% low in certain game. And obviously, this is based on the fact that Linux has to go through the wrapper, and some of those 1% low, they will still be under no matter what. The good news is Linux is getting there, and I'm looking forward to see Linux getting better and Proton getting better. There is the little black duck here, Starfield, and here you can see that Starfield, and it's super interesting, is actually working so good on Linux compared to Windows. It's just mind-blowing. But there, I think this is where the story starts to take off for me, and I see it give me kind of another hint to my theory. So guys, hear me out, because this is important. When you think about Starfield, we know this game is really badly optimized. But the wonderful, I would say, aspect of Linux there is that because it's open source, all the devs which are involved in the improvement of Mesa, of Proton, of Wine, they kind of have the opportunity to put their hand behind, under the hood, and make the thing better for Linux ahead of everybody else. And this is where you have the story here, okay? Because they can make the game run better and fix some of the issues related to the game on their side. And I made a video about it, and this is actually really cool to see that the Linux dev were able to push the limit of Linux so far. Think about it, on Arch Linux, the 1% low are 23% higher than on Windows 11. It's just insane. Okay, it's just insane. But on the other hand, you need to think about the other side of the story. And you're gonna tell me Air Max, what is the other side of the story? Well, the other side of the story, if you remember, we noticed that they made the test in a CPU-bound scenario. So that's the first point. CPU-bound scenario, I've noticed on my hand that when the game is CPU-bound on Linux, I wouldn't say it always performs, but it mostly performs better than on Windows. So with my hardware, which is a 5950X from AMD and an NVIDIA card, if I take a game where I'm CPU bound, which means all the result of the benchmark is going to depend on the CPU mostly rather than the graphic card, well, I'm going to have better result on Linux. my theory behind it is that Linux is way better to handle the AMD CPU in general. That's the first point. And also way better to handle the CPU usage in general. You have to think that Linux comes from the server side, and managing the CPU, the RAM, the transfer, the throughput is really what it's all about, right? On the server. So you can see why the optimization related to Linux will shine in this type of like case scenario. That's the first point. So the second point I want to mention is the fact they went with a GPU from AMD. So I have nothing against the GPU from AMD, like don't get me wrong, but the story is that the GPU from AMD, they have been known historically to perform not the best, or like I would say the worst on Windows. It's known, I don't know if I need to show you data there, but it's been known for a long time that AMD is performing bad on Windows. Maybe it changes the latest year, maybe it changed like the last month, maybe it changed yesterday. But what I'm trying to say is like historically, AMD is not a good choice if you run Windows. So you're gonna tell me, Mark, this is not true, AMD is great and blah, blah, blah. You have nothing to back that up. I'll be like, okay. So, this is a Steam hardware and software survey from November 2023. And when you look at here, you look at the PC video card usage by manufacturer. 75.1% of the users are running NVIDIA. 16% are running AMD. And 8.2% are running Intel. You have to take in consideration that also on those two ones, like AMD and Intel, you have all the incorporated video card within the actual CPU. Okay? And on top of that, so cherries on the cake, you have to take in consideration the user of the Steam Deck, which are part of those 16%. So why am I showing you that? Well, I'm showing you that because most of the users, they use Windows for gaming. That's a fact too. Like gaming on Linux is brand new. It's not really well pushed everywhere in all the household. And when the user has to, buy a graphic card, they made their research, I hope. And what they notice is that even if the NVIDIA cards are a little bit pricier compared to the AMD one, they'd still go with NVIDIA. Right? Because again, it has been known that those AMD cards are not the best on Windows. So when it comes to Linux, obviously, you're gonna have a way lot more of users using AMD. And the big one on top of the list, you know what it is. It is the Steam Deck at 43%. However, you need to understand the reason why AMD is favored in those cases. It is favored in those cases, and this is my theory, because the way the drivers are being developed through Linux is just insane. The driver, in my opinion, they just perform better overall on Linux than on Windows. And this could also explain the result we have seen in the previous article, in which, for this specific setup of AMD CPU, AMD GPU, you have such a good overall performance compared to Windows. And this is where I want your input, guys. Do you think this could be the case? Or do you think I'm totally crazy? I could be totally crazy. But what I noticed on my end, running some benchmark on Linux, is that with my NVIDIA driver, I will always be between 10 to, I would say, -10 plus 5% in terms of performance compared to Windows. But I would say most of the time, I will always be behind the result of Windows. And it's okay, guys. Okay, I'm not bitching about it or feeling really bad about it. But this is the reality of the benchmark. And I would have loved those guys as a computer-based website to kind of like open the test a little bit more and really like share most of those tests. Because I think the story there is kind of misleading. It is misleading because by choosing this CPU, this GPU, and this resolution and those games, they really put Linux in favor of the win. And the outcome of the full article from, a reader standpoint could be, oh, well, Linux is better than Windows. Well, it's not there yet. Yes, if you have an AMD card and an AMD CPU, it's gonna be better. And you are playing on 1080p, it's gonna be better. But why is it going to be better? Is it going to be better because Linux is better? Or is it going to be better because the driver in Linux is actually outperforming the driver in Windows? That's the question I'm asking. And I want to have your feedback, guys. I want to know what you think. So I know like there is a lot of debate. If you go on the forum of the actual like website, like there is like 500 posts. I know in the gaming Linux friends community, we had a rough debate toward like the little theory behind each of us, like thinking like, oh no, this is because of that, this is because of that. And I wanted to share my theory is like compared to also like my finding, right? Because I can't reproduce those results with my NVIDIA card. It's impossible. There is some specific case scenario where, again, like I told you, when I'm really CPU bound, I can kind of like show that I'm a little bit above, but I can't have this consistency they show there. And man, like I feel like as the owner of a YouTube channel, trying to explain how good Linux is, we all have to be kind of like objective. I want Linux to succeed. I want to share with you one day, yes, we won, like Linux is the best, but I can't say it if it's not the case, if there is something else behind, right? And that's why, like, when I read this article, I felt like I had to do a video about it. I have to come with my reality and my founding. So, yeah. We are not there yet. That's what I believe. Okay, that's it. That's all. Guys, thank you very much for watching. Again, I want to thank all the viewers of this video. I want to thank all the contributors, all the people who helped me financially. Thanks again, guys. And yeah, bisous, bisous. See you in the next one. Actually, see you tomorrow. Take care.